Mbali, again, Kamala Harris is the first woman elected as vice president of the U.S., also the first African American, the first South Asian American to be elected. But those elements are outside of her control. My question would be, shouldn't we be looking at the fact that she's also the highest ranking female elected official? Why do you think that's not the most talked about aspect of her historic victory?
Well, I think it's quite obvious. I think that because it's all the accolades that you've just mentioned that are a part of her genetic makeup are overshadowing anything else because we've just never seen this before. And I think for so many people, young women, young black women, young people of color who are seeing this historic moment, that for them is the first thing that comes. Although it doesn't negate, obviously, her great achievements that she's had as a senator and as an attorney general and everything else. But I think these moments really make us reflect on what is possible. And I think she herself summed it up very well in her speech when she said she may be the first, but she won't be the last. And that in itself is telling because it sends a signal to young women all over the world that this is possible. And I think that for right now is what everyone is really just finding glorious and really basking in at the moment.
What specific significance do you think this has for women in politics in South Africa?
Well, I think South Africa has been ahead of the curve in that we have had a significant female representation at the high echelons of power in our country. We already had a first vice president female already, but I think that this just reiterates that we belong and that we should be in the political space, and that in the same way that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Gloria Steinem, Harriet Tubman, women who have not been from our country, have inspired women in our country to fight for the battles that they've seen, and certainly we have many women to call from. This again just reinvigorates that. And as a young, female politician, I'm really excited that this is happening. But for me, Kamala Harris is a year older than my mother. What I really want to see now going forward, obviously that this glass ceiling has been smashed, as younger females being able to rise to that kind of level of power, because certainly in South Africa with 70% of young people being part of our population, I think we need to be inspired by seeing that more, because we already have a lot of old people who are already in the echelons of power.
So you've said that we've already had a number of strong female political figures here in South Africa in leadership. But what's been your experience of the glass ceiling in terms of patriarchy shutting down women, not only in moments of power, but in moments of truth? When you do speak out, are you squashed in that moment? You're allowed the room to be there, but not the room to speak?
I think that we still have a long way to go in terms of even understanding our own unconscious bias around female politicians. I mean, certainly in the race that I've just come from, I had people telling me things like that my voice was a bit too high, nasally, really weird things that I can't change, that I don't think people mean in a malicious way, but it's still an unconscious bias of the obstacles that females who certainly deserve to be at the table still have to overcome. And Kamala, again, spoke about this herself, saying that you have to almost prove doubly that you should be at that table. And certainly I think, again, particularly when it comes to young women, not only do you have the obstacles of being young, but you're also in an environment that doesn't favor just your gender in general. And so you don't want to have the kind of representation that we have seen sometimes where it's almost aesthetic only. You want these women to be around the table, to be diverse, but also to be included in the decision making. I don't think we have enough of that in South Africa, and I think that you can see by the lack of young political female leadership that we have. And it's incredibly hard. And the patriarchy also makes things like primary caregiving skewed in the way that you have to do your job. And I mean, I speak as somebody who's also a mother now. And in a few years' time, if I have 2 children who are school-going age, I might not be in the position to be at the top of a political party, for example, because I would also want to really concentrate on my family. And we haven't had females who have been in this position to change the way that the system looks at that. And I would have liked to do that if I'd won the DA leadership, but I think that it still needs to be something that's spoken about. Otherwise, the next time that maybe even I will be able to run is when I'm my mother age, which is 55.
What do you think the important message should be to all women, but also especially to young women, about women supporting women?
I think we've seen with Stacey Abrams, with all the other women who are organizing in America in various different states to try and get this election to happen, that we are phenomenally capable of being able to mobilize and to get the kind of outcomes that we want. And we really don't have to wait for people to give us permission, that we really need to be able to take power, quite frankly, and not wait to have somebody, pass it down to us by the baton. But I also think it speaks to people who are in positions of power and who are privileged. And I think that's something that Joe Biden will be remembered for in his legacy, is that he, as somebody who was able to be an ally to the representation of women, people of color, by saying, I want to use my power to make sure that I am bringing equality and the diversity of the selection team that I have. And I think that that's something that we need to really utilize going forward, and not for aesthetic reasons, but really because that's what we want to see happening in our country. And as a country in South Africa, I really think we haven't seen enough of that happening. And I hope that all political leaderships from all political parties are watching this kind of race and remembering that what we need is a diverse group of people, but we also need to make sure that we are giving people the opportunity to show themselves in terms of their leadership capabilities, who aren't always considered. And I speak specifically of women who have to cross so many boundaries to be considered worthwhile or capable.
Well, thank you so very much for speaking to us. That was Mbali Ntuli chatting to us about the impact of the election of Kamala Harris as Vice President in the US.